One day the world suddenly descended into chaos. The first phase was a disease that caused a pandemic that affected 740,000 individuals in their 20s to 30s and threatened the lives of millions. The leaders of each country gathered and discussed the best step forward. In this gathering it was decided that working together and sharing findings is the best way to come up with a cure to this pandemic. However, as they worked together, the relationship of each country deteriorated, and shortly after a war broke out. Each country suffered economically. This started the food shortage crisis, and as the people starved they took to the streets, rioting as a form of protest. But what really hammered the final nail in humanity's coffin wasn't the pandemic or the wars, it was them. Game-like monsters, dragons, goblins, orcs, and other monsters that would only appear in video games or one's imagination suddenly started appearing on Earth. What happened next followed every novel you have seen so far. Humans who possess special abilities started to appear to combat these monsters. However, unlike the novels, the awakened humans weren't strong enough to fend off the monsters. The monsters were of a nightmarish difficulty, and every attempt humanity made ended up failing. And in just 3 days humanity was hanging on the brink of extinction. The scene then shifts to a high-rise apartment surrounded by a sea of debris. Unlike the other buildings around, this apartment was completely untouched, like it was somehow invisible to the monsters. Inside one of the rooms, we meet our protagonist, Lee. Lee was wearing a white t-shirt and black shorts. He hasn't been able to get a haircut in a while, so his hair was a mess. But despite all this, he was casually enjoying some chips. Amidst the apocalypse, he is able to carry on living normally. As he munched on the chips, he took a sip of a nearly empty can of soda. Afterwards, he let out a sigh. Even though he could enjoy a normal life, he was alone. The panel pans out and we get to see the apartment in full detail. It was a mess with trash bags, empty packets of ramen noodles, and used toilet paper everywhere. Luckily, he is the only one living in this messy 100 square meter apartment. His mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma were all outside. And because he was alone, he lacked the motivation to get up and clean. Before the apocalypse started, his dad decided to buy this apartment. It was bought by borrowing a total of 200 million won from the bank and selling all of their family assets, which totaled another 200 million won. However, the reason he was staying at the apartment despite being born with a silver spoon in his mouth is because someone needed to live in the apartment for 2 years before they could enjoy the tax benefits from buying it. And because he is a shut-in, his parents decided that he would be the perfect person. This is why he has been living in this place. However, he has been locked in here ever since the apocalypse started. Normally that wouldn't be a problem, but 3 days ago he suddenly lost connection to the internet. He let out a sigh. As a shut-in, this fate is worse than death. He stared at the no internet connection notification on his phone with a depressed look, and thought to himself, pondering how he is going to keep himself entertained without internet. Suddenly he heard a loud screech coming from outside. He froze. But the screeching continued. He walked towards the balcony, and in the sky, he noticed the silhouette of a creature he had never seen before flying around his apartment. Lee approached cautiously. However, he wasn't scared. He thought to himself, it can't be that bad. Look how tiny its shadow is. He decided to stay by the window and observe the creature, and as the creature flew by, it spotted Lee and dived headfirst at the window. Lee shrieked as he stumbled backwards. Unlike what he thought, this bastard was massive. He shielded his face, and all that was heard was a thud as the monster's body slammed into the window. Lee shouted, "Please don't eat me. I can't die yet. I'm a virgin." With every passing second he felt nothing but horror as he waited for death. However, nothing was happening. He opened one of his eyes slightly and took a peek at the window. The monster couldn't enter. It banged its head repeatedly against the window. However, each time it was stopped by a barrier. The monster continued, and Lee received a notification from the system informing him that a subject who hasn't been permitted entry is trying to enter his domain. This effect was caused by Lee's passive skill, Ultimate Shut-In. No one can enter the apartment without the ruler's permission. Lee held his chest, feeling a sense of relief. He stood up, narrating that he forgot the reason why a scrawny, weak shut-in like him has been able to survive up till now was because of this ability. He moved away from the balcony and approached the door. The door had been sealed shut. Before, he didn't have a reason to be concerned about being locked in his room. However, the situation has changed. He started kicking the door and shouting, "No, please let me out. You can't leave me in here without any internet." After kicking the door till his foot hurt, he walked towards the balcony. After the world as we knew it came to an end, this darn ability protected him. At first it was heaven on earth, but now that the internet and power had gone out, it has become a hellish prison. For the rest of the day, Lee sat in the corner of the room, amidst all the trash, staring at a message from the system that read, "The ultimate shut-in cannot leave the house." The message infuriated Lee. "Shitty ass fucking ability," he muttered. He was bored with nothing to do. On top of that, he was running into another problem. He was running out of food. All the food in his fridge was about to go bad because the electricity went out yesterday. Up until now he had been surviving on the snacks and the side dishes in the fridge that his mom made him. There was only a few packets of ramen left, and as he thought about starving to death, he started chewing on his nails nervously. He thought to himself that he would have to starve to death because of this shitty ability. He was stuck inside this room, with no way of going outside to scavenge for more food. Suddenly he received another notification from the system. The message congratulated him for hunting the level 23 calican, and he was rewarded with a large amount of experience, which caused his skill to level up. Lee couldn't believe what he was reading. He quickly made his way to the balcony. As he approached, he could no longer hear the sound coming from the calican banging its head on the shield. He watched as the calican's dead body fell to the ground, and instantly after hitting the ground a group of goblins swarmed the calican's body. Lee was confused. He thought to himself, questioning if the system gave him credit for hunting the calican because it crashed into his house. Lee suddenly received 3 messages from the system. The first informed him that he obtained a new skill. The second read that a corpse nearby had met the requirements to be looted. And the final message informed him that the loot from the calican was being calculated. As Lee was reading the message, he heard a screech. He shifted his attention to the goblins, who were screeching. It seemed as if they had entered a frenzy. Lee observed them, questioning why they were suddenly acting like that. Another message from the system appeared, announcing that the loot calculation was complete, and 2,203,241 won has been deposited into the wallet of the ultimate shut-in. Lee stared at the notification, wondering what it could be about. Then suddenly the lights in his apartment turned on. He couldn't believe it. He turned and faced the light bulb and muttered in a questioning tone, "Why did the lights suddenly come back on?" Lee received another message from the system. The skill Ultimate Shut-In was now level 3. Furthermore, the other skill he received for killing the calican, Dignity Preservation, has allowed half of the house functions to be restored. Lee shouted with joy as he read through the message from the system. He quickly made his way to the fridge and opened it, and after checking the condition of the food, he stood in front of the open fridge and enjoyed the cool breeze that was flowing from it. He went around the apartment checking the faucet and stove. After confirming that they were working, he dropped to his knees, and with tears streaming down his face, he started thanking the gods for reverting things to how they were before the world ended. Excited, he pulled out his phone to check if the internet had returned. Sadly, the internet still wasn't working. Amidst the trash, he noticed something that piqued his interest. A USB was mixed in with all the trash bags and used paper towels. He grabbed the USB and sat at his computer, then he pulled up pictures of his family. Lee looked at the photos his parents took of him as he grew into adulthood. Seeing the family photos made him emotional. He let out a sigh. However, his anger continued to build, and with a determined look in his eyes, Lee promised himself that he will bring his family here no matter what. With a goal and newfound motivation, he stood up from the chair and made his way to the balcony. He stared out into the hellish landscape. He clenched his fist, thinking hard about how he could find his family and bring them here. The first step is to leave this apartment, but the big question is, how can he leave his apartment when his ability forces him to stay inside? He decided to check the system to read up on all of his abilities. He hoped to discover something that could be of use. As he read through his abilities, he found something the system had yet to tell him about. It was the ability called the Ultimate Shut-In Store. This ability lets him buy items he lists in a store at the original prices you would buy them. Lee stared at the store panel in a daze, then a prompt appeared asking him if he would like to list an item for the first time. Seeing how the system was showing his balance, Lee guessed that the store was connected to another one of his skills, the Shut-In's wallet. However, he didn't know what to make of this skill. Feeling flustered, he opened his balcony door. However, as he tried to step through, he was blocked by a barrier, and a prompt appeared reminding him that the ultimate shut-in cannot leave his house. Lee guessed that this would be the case. He rested his hands on the balcony and stared out into the horizon. Even though his skill leveled up, he still isn't allowed to leave. Plus, even if he could leave, there is nothing a skinny weakling like him can do against the monsters. As he thought about it, his path forward became clearer. If he continues to hunt monsters, he will level up and get new skills, and he might be able to obtain a skill that makes it possible for him to leave. Lee shifted his gaze to the prompt that had appeared on the barrier. He thought to himself, pondering how he could get the monster's attention and ultimately kill them without leaving his apartment. Lee had his eyes on the 2 calican that were circling around his block. However, he wasn't hopeful that another situation like before would happen again. But then an idea came to mind. He remembered the goblins that pounced on the calican that died earlier. He shifted his gaze towards the ground, hoping that the goblins would still be busy with the calican's corpse. The goblins were still cutting away at the calican's corpse. However, from the looks of things, they should be done soon. Lee looked on anxiously. He thought that he might be able to kill those goblins. But first he needed a way to attack them from inside his apartment. He stepped away from the balcony and looked around in his apartment for something he could throw away. After looking around, he found and picked up a water bottle. He stood near the balcony door and with his arms pulled back, he prepared to throw the water bottle. He tossed the water bottle outside the balcony with all of his might, and the water bottle bypassed the barrier and flew out the balcony door. As the water bottle traveled through the air, Lee looked on with an ecstatic expression on his face. He shouted, "Sweet Jesus, it works." With this he confirmed that he can throw items outside from inside the apartment. He stepped away from the balcony again, and he started looking for something with more weight than a water bottle. However, he still needed to be able to throw it a good distance. His attention was drawn to the set of 10-pound dumbbells his mom got for him because she was concerned about his lack of exercise. He grabbed the dumbbell out of the cabinet, and with a smile he exclaimed, "Let's try these bad boys." Suddenly, however, he heard a screech coming from outside. He quickly made his way to the balcony with the dumbbell in hand. And on the street Lee saw a goblin addressing the other goblins who were butchering the calican's corpse into smaller portions for easy transport. Suddenly the goblins increased their pace, and after finishing dividing up the calican's meat, each goblin grabbed a piece and started heading back to their nest. Lee panicked. He shouted, "No, don't leave." He quickly pulled his arm back and tossed the dumbbell in the goblin's direction, and as the dumbbell flew through the air, he started praying for the god's favor so he wouldn't miss. However, he missed. The dumbbell landed slightly behind the goblin in the back. Lee started sweating nervously. He looked back at the cabinet, and to his horror there was only one dumbbell left. No doubt about it, he was screwed. He didn't know what to do now. He crossed his arms and started thinking. He doesn't have anything else in the house that is heavy enough to deal damage to the goblins. There's the TV and computer, but he wasn't strong enough to throw those. Suddenly his thinking was interrupted by the screeching of the goblins. The goblins had gathered at the base of the apartment, and after Lee made his way to the balcony, the one that seemed to be the leader pointed him out to the other goblins. They suddenly started screeching in unison. Lee was horrified. He froze for a moment and his mind went completely blank. The goblins dropped the calican's meat and suddenly charged at the apartment. However, just like the calican, they were stopped by a barrier. Lee realized that this might not be as bad as he thought. At this distance it will be easier for him to aim properly. However, the issue is that he still doesn't have enough things to throw to kill them all. But then a thought came to mind. He remembered the skill he unlocked recently. He reached forth his hand and exclaimed, "System open store." A system panel appeared in front of him, and he was prompted to list an item in the ultimate shut-in store. Lee decided to list his first item, and a message appeared asking him if he was ready to list his first item. Lee picked up the dumbbell and confirmed that he was ready. The system scanned the dumbbell, and a short while later Lee was informed that the classic non-slip 10-pound dumbbell had been listed in the ultimate shut-in store. Lee checked the store, and the dumbbell had indeed been listed on the store. It would cost Lee $16,991 to purchase the item. Lee was taken aback. The dumbbell was listed at the same price as when his mom bought them. This was a shock because it means the market rate is the same as before the world ended, so he wouldn't have to worry about inflated prices. He decided to purchase one of the dumbbells, and he watched in amazement as the system materialized the dumbbell out of nothing. Afterwards he exclaimed in excitement, "It really worked." He felt relieved that he had secured a way to acquire more dumbbells, and without hesitation he immediately threw the dumbbell out the balcony, hitting one of the goblins in the head and killing it. For killing the level 7 goblin, Lee received a small amount of experience, and 3,345 won was deposited into the ultimate shut-in's wallet. Lee cheered as the notifications from the system rolled in. Meanwhile, the goblins gathered around their fallen comrade, mourning its death. The leader of the goblins stood and it started shouting. However, this was interrupted by Lee, who threw another dumbbell. The goblins noticed the dumbbell and quickly moved out of the way. The dumbbell landed on the ground with a loud thud, and the goblins started taunting Lee. Out of frustration, Lee purchased 3 sets of the dumbbells, and after they materialized, he started chucking them at the goblins. One of the dumbbells hit a goblin in the head, killing it, and for killing a level 6 goblin, 2,512 won was added to the ultimate shut-in's wallet, and Lee also received a small amount of experience. He leveled up and obtained a new skill. Lee cheerfully exclaimed, "Hell yes," and he proceeded to check his status window. He read through the updated status window looking for the new skill. After finding the skill, he read through the description. This skill allows him to store items in an alternate dimension. Lee immediately saw the potential of this skill. In every novel he has read throughout his life, the main character has some kind of storage skill. He couldn't contain himself, and he decided to try out the new skill right now. He exclaimed, "System open storage," and a panel appeared asking him if he would like to store an item. Lee picked up a dumbbell, and after confirming that he would like to store the item, he watched as the dumbbell dematerialized. Afterwards, he checked the storage space and confirmed that the dumbbell had been stored, and not surprisingly, there was an option to summon the item out of the storage space. Lee couldn't contain his excitement. He was smiling ear to ear. He summoned the dumbbell out of the storage space, and the dumbbell materialized in his hand. He grasped the dumbbell tightly, and with a smile on his face, he rejoiced. This skill seemed broken, but in a good way. Not only can he store items in an alternate dimension, it seems like he could also potentially summon the stored items in any place he desires. However, that is yet to be tested. With that thought, a devilish idea came to mind. He stared at the goblins, who were the perfect test subjects, with a devilish smile. The panel pans out, showing us the apartment building, and from Lee's balcony a blue light shone. A short while later, Lee's voice was heard exclaiming, "System open storage." We see him reaching forth his hand, and suddenly hundreds of dumbbells started materializing in the sky. The dumbbells rained down, wiping out the goblins. Lee was bombarded with notifications from the system confirming his kills. He was granted a large amount of experience, and 54,661 was deposited into the ultimate shut-in's wallet. Afterwards, Lee received a message from the system informing him that he can list 9 more items in the ultimate shut-in store, and he was prompted to list additional items. Lee was finally enjoying his awakened ability. With a joyful smile, he decided to list more items. Lee opened his status window, and he spent the rest of the day thinking about what items to list. The next day, he had a list of 8 items to list in the ultimate shut-in store. First was 10 Jan ramen mild priced at 31,001. Second was 12 2-liters Semdisu water bottles priced at 12,401. Third was 1 5-kilogram rice bag priced at 14,891. Fourth was 10 special eggs priced at 39.51. The fifth item was 930 milliliters of easy-to-digest milk priced at 6,221. The sixth item was 24 packs of Yongbin olive seaweed priced at 9,801. The eighth item was 2 bottles of 900 milliliters of canola oil priced at 12,321. And the final item that Lee listed was 500 grams of half-used tomato ketchup priced at 3,351. The previous day, as he was coming up with the list, he stored all of the dumbbells he used to defeat the goblins inside the storage space, and today he sold the dumbbells, along with all kinds of groceries and daily necessities he no longer needed. However, to his surprise, after selling everything back, he noticed that he lost money. The money in his wallet went from 2,203,241 to 2,178,805. Lee stared at his balance deep and thought about how he lost money. This didn't make sense. He thought that he should have at least made some money back from selling his excess groceries. He wondered if the reason he still lost money is because it costs money to keep the dignity preservation passive skill on. He looked around the apartment. With the electric, gas, and water bill, it makes sense. However, this poses a problem. Lee held his hip and grumbled, "Those damn goblin bastards." After hunting the goblins by dropping dumbbells on them yesterday, it seemed like they abandoned their nest. He narrates that since yesterday, he has only been able to kill 2 more goblins. Lee approached the balcony, clenching his fist in frustration. "Damn it, where are all the creatures?" he muttered. He looked around his apartment, but the only thing he saw was the head of the calican and its bones. This saddened Lee's mood. However, to save his family, he desperately needed to find another way. He shifted his gaze to the sunny clear skies, wondering if the gods would bless him with a calican today. As he looked to the sky, he noticed a silhouette of a calican. This excited him. He ran inside to look for something that could get the monster's attention. A short while later, Lee returned with a small mirror attached to a ladder. The sunlight reflected off of the mirror, getting the calican's attention. The calican suddenly changed course. It dived at Lee, and Lee looked on with a smile. He was excited that his plan worked. The calican banged its head on the barrier, and Lee's excitement grew as he watched the monster repeatedly bash its body against the barrier. If this continued, then the calican would die like the first one, and Lee had a feeling that he was on the verge of leveling up. He couldn't help but wonder what type of skill he would obtain next. The calican suddenly stopped, and it flapped its wings repeatedly, creating a gust of wind that almost lifted Lee off of the ground. Lee braced himself, and as the gust settled, he opened his eyes. But to his horror, the calican was gone. He quickly ran out to the balcony and noticed the calican perched up on the roof of the apartment. The calican looked down and screeched at Lee. This time Lee was genuinely horrified. He thought that the calican had figured out a way to bypass the barrier. The calican attacked with its beak this time, however it was stopped by the barrier. It proceeded to launch a barrage of beak attacks, but each attack was blocked by the barrier. Lee stood there feeling completely powerless. What just happened made him lose faith in the barrier. As he watched, he grew increasingly concerned that the calican would either break through or get tired and fly away. It was clear that he needed to move fast. He reached forth his hand, exclaiming, "System open store," and Lee was presented with the items he listed in the ultimate shut-in store. He narrates that from what he observed so far, loot calculation only happens if the corpse is nearby. He learnt this after failing to hunt the goblins the previous day. Some of the survivors took the corpses of their dead allies away, and those corpses were not calculated as loot by the system. In other words, if the distance exceeds a certain limit, loot calculation won't occur. He gritted his teeth. So far he hasn't been able to determine the distance limit, meaning he can't let this opportunity pass him by. However, he wondered if he had a way of killing the calican in one shot, and as he scrambled around, his gaze was drawn to the canola oil he had listed in the ultimate shut-in store. He quickly purchased the canola oil, and the system materialized 12 canola oil in front of him. Lee quickly grabbed as many as he could, and he ran to the kitchen. He grabbed a pot and poured as much canola oil into the pot as he could. Afterwards, he turned the oven to the max and walked away. He returned shortly after with paper towels wrapped on a stick. He used tape to make sure the paper towels stayed on the stick, and afterwards he dipped the paper towel end of the stick into the pot. Then he grabbed the pot, exclaiming, "System open storage." A prompt appeared, asking if there's an item Lee would like to store. Lee shouted yes and proceeded to pour the boiling hot canola oil on the system panel. Afterwards, he received a message from the system stating that the boiling hot canola oil has been stored successfully. Lee quickly grabbed a lighter he had laying around, and he lit the paper towel end of the stick on fire. As the fire burnt through the paper towel rapidly, he quickly made his way to the balcony, and he summoned the boiling hot canola oil from the storage space above the unsuspecting calican. The calican was doused in hot oil, and it let out a pain-induced screech. The monster started flapping its wings, preparing to fly away, so with the makeshift torch he created, Lee threw it at the calican, shouting for the monster to die. The calican's entire body caught on fire, and Lee looked on with a grin. It seemed his plan worked. The monster fell to the ground, and it rolled around screeching in pain. Lee looked on anxiously as the calican tried to put the fire out. However, the fire continued to burn, and shortly after the calican died. For successfully killing the level 27 calican, Lee obtained a massive amount of experience. He leveled up twice and also obtained a new skill. A prompt appeared in front of him, stating that a loot nearby had met the requirements, and his loot was being calculated. Shortly after the calculations were done and 9,347,487 won was deposited into the wallet of the ultimate shut-in. This surprised Lee. He stuttered, and 9 million won. This was almost 10 million won, which was way more than he received the first time for killing a calican. He guessed that the reason the rewards were so much better this time around is because he actively participated in hunting the calican. Lee stared at the number on the interface in disbelief, then a prompt appeared stating that he had met the requirements. The house territory expansion had begun. Before Lee could process any of this, the building suddenly started shaking violently. Confused, Lee questioned what was happening all of the sudden. His vision started to blur, and he felt an ache in his stomach. His senses were heightened. His vision became black and white, and it started to expand. With the expansion of his vision and senses, Lee became aware of everything around him. His vision continued to expand, and somewhere in the building he sensed a family of 4, a father, a mother, and their 2 children. The family had gathered around an empty dinner table with gloomy expression on their faces. This development was shocking to Lee as he wasn't expecting to meet people anytime soon. He pondered if they were the neighbors in the house besides his. Lee's brain was being overloaded with information. He held his left eye in pain as his vision and senses continued to expand. Suddenly his vision and senses stopped expanding, and everything returned to normal. He was in pain, however he couldn't really process the pain because he was occupied thinking about the family he just saw. Then 4 panels, displaying a picture, name, and age of each person he just observed, appeared in front of him. The husband, Choi Hyunjun, was in his late 30s. The wife, Choi Hyun, was also in her late 30s. The first child, Choi Naeun, was 6, and the second child, Choi Seoyeon, was 3 years old. The system informed Lee that this family meets the requirements to be taken in as citizens, and he received a prompt asking him if he would like to grant them citizenship. Lee stood up straight. He wanted to know what would happen if he didn't grant the family citizenship. The system explained that beings that are not given citizenship will be expelled out of the house. Lee was then presented with a prompt asking if he doesn't want to grant the family citizenship. Lee looked on with a horrified expression. He narrates that if he doesn't give them citizenship, then all of them will be exposed to the threat of the monsters. He never expected that the lives of others would rest on his hands. After some thinking, he decided to give the family citizenship. Afterwards, he opened his system window. With this settled, he turned his attention to the other skill he unlocked that relates to the citizenship skill. As he read through his status window, he found the skill Ultimate Eyes, a skill that allows him to see everything in the house. As he played around in the status window, he wondered if he unlocked any skills that relates to his citizens. His search brought him to the Ultimate Shut-in skill window, and he noticed an option on the bottom hand side labeled Citizenship Management. He clicked on the option and a panel appeared. Lee has 4 citizens registered currently and he can have a maximum of 600. What's more is that this panel shows him how much each citizen trusts him. Lee was taken aback. He wasn't planning on housing 600 people, he just wanted to save his family. He called the husband's name and a window showing more details about Choi Hyunjin appeared. Choi had no awakened ability, and from this window Lee could edit Choi's experience distribution rate as well as money distribution rate. He could also give him a quest and expel him from the house. All this information confused Lee. He held his hip questioning if the experience and money distribution rate was talking about the experience and money that they will share with him if he sends them out to hunt monsters. He narrates that if that's the case then he can easily control how much money and experience he wants to receive from his citizens. His expression shifted to a grin, and he narrates that this must be how he is supposed to grow stronger without leaving his house. He referred back to the system and turned his attention to the option to give his citizens a quest. When he clicked the quest option underneath Choi's window, a window labeled Give Quest appeared, and here he could fill in the quest details, things like time to complete the quest, rewards, and penalty for failure. This sounded interesting, so he decided to fill out a quest for Choi. A short while later Lee had filled out the quest details. The quest was to hunt 1 goblin, and the time was 168 hours. The reward was a small amount of experience, and he didn't give any penalty for failure. Afterwards a prompt appeared asking Lee if he would like to assign the quest to Choi. Lee stared at the quest window. He was curious about how far he could take the penalty for his citizens failing his quests. He exclaimed, "System change penalty for failure to death," and the penalty for failure was changed to death. Afterwards he received another prompt, asking if he was now ready to assign the quest to Choi. However, Lee swiftly cancelled the quest. There was no way he could put Choi in that situation when he hasn't even introduced himself yet. After cancelling the quest, he received a prompt confirming that the quest had been cancelled. Lee sat on the ground with his legs crossed. He was starting to understand the weight of the skill. He narrates that if he wanted to he could kill his citizens whenever he wants. He stared at the panel from the system wondering why he was given this ability and what to do with it. He activated the Ultimate Eye skill and his senses and vision were heightened again. However, unlike before, his body had gotten used to the sensation, and he could bear the pain this time without almost collapsing. His vision and senses expanded, and he was able to see everything, including the family. The wife, Hyun, suddenly spoke up and asked Choi if he knew what they should do now. Choi went silent. He thought to himself for a moment, trying to come up with an idea. However, he didn't know what else to do other than leaving and going outside to try and find some food and water. He told Hyun that if they are going to continue on living, then he has no choice but to go out and scavenge for food and water. However, he couldn't put his family in harm's way, so he asked Hyun to stay here with the kids. Hyun protested, "You can't be serious, it's too dangerous out there." Choi explained that he understands the risk, however they are out of food and water, so he has no choice. Hyun continued to protest against the idea. She asked him if there's any place left where he could get water and food without running into monsters. Choi explained that he was planning to go to the nearby convenience store. It's a pretty large store, so he was hoping that there would be some resources left. Hyun went silent, even though she didn't want Choi to go outside. If they continue on like this, then the kids will starve to death. Soo-yeon spoke, exclaiming that she's thirsty. This made it evident to Choi that he needed to find some water and food quickly. He clenched his fists, and after gathering himself, he turned to Hyun with a forced smile and held her hand. He proceeded to ask her to trust him and assured her that he will definitely return with food and water and his life. Hyun went silent. She seemed to want to say something, however she couldn't. Lee deactivated the Ultimate Eye skill. The situation was way worse than he thought, and he wasn't sure if it was the right call to get involved. He opened the Ultimate Shut-in store and narrated that there was only one open slot left to list an item, and considering that he still has to find his family, he wasn't sure if using the final slot to help this random family he has never interacted with before would be the best option. Continuing on, he adds that he would be less concerned about using his last slot if there was a way to increase the capacity so he could list more things. He exclaimed anxiously, "System, open my status window," and a panel appeared in front of him showing him his skills. He looked through the system window and he learned about skill points. Underneath every skill he had an option to increase the skill level using 1 skill point, and he had gathered 3 skill points. Lee punched the air in excitement and exclaimed out loud, "Hell yes." He received a prompt asking him if he would like to increase the level of the Ultimate Shut-in store, and without hesitating Lee confirmed that he would. The system panel shone a blue light, and shortly after, the ultimate shut-in store was increased to level 2, and the number of items that can now be listed was increased to 20. A 10% discount was also applied to the prices of all items. Without a doubt this was good, and Lee made it a point to carefully read through his status window when he has time. But for now he has 2 points remaining and he was tempted to use it to invest more on the ultimate shut-in store and dignity preservation. His concern was that he might run into more citizens as time went on. He upgraded the ultimate shut-in store to level 3, and the number of items that can be listed in the store increased to 40. He also unlocked the function to restore items. The function to restore old or broken items piqued Lee's interest. He thought about all the different possibilities for this new function, and it brought a smile to his face. He narrates that it was definitely worth it to spend 2 skill points to increase the level of the ultimate shut-in store to level 3. He opened the store, and he could now buy the listed items at 3 times less than their original price. Lee purchased Samdi water and Jeju tangerines, however he wanted to increase the level of his other skills too. He opened the system window, and after thinking about it, he decided to use his final skill point to increase the level of his dignity preservation skill. A prompt appeared, asking him if he would really like to use his final skill point to increase the level of the dignity preservation skill, and Lee confirmed that he would. If he can provide electricity and water to his citizens, then he can request a lot more from them in return. The skill level was increased to level 2, and Lee unlocked the option to register a vassal. This confused Lee. The scene then shifts to Choi and his family. Choi had packed a backpack, and as he approached the door, he looked back one last time. Hyun was doing her best to comfort the kids, and before leaving, Choi stepped away from the door. He went to his wife and kids, and with a forced smile, he assured the kids that he will be back, and he asked them to protect the house while he was gone. The kids looked up at him anxiously, and Nayeon asked him if he was really going outside. Choi patted her on the head and explained that he has no choice, and that if they want food and water he has to go outside and find some. He promised them that he would be back, and while he was out he asked them to be good and listen to their mother. Nayeon and Soyeon started crying, and as tears streamed down their faces, Nayeon exclaimed that she didn't want her dad to go outside. She explained that there are scary monsters out there. In a flashback to before the apocalypse started, the family were at the local park, and the 2 daughters were busy playing at the sandpit when suddenly, goblins attacked. The 6-year-old grabbed her younger sister's arm and she made a run for it. As they ran, Choi and Hyun noticed the monsters. They grabbed their kids and made a run for their home. Ever since that day they have been barricaded inside their house, and luckily they haven't encountered any monsters since they barricaded the house. The 2 girls continued to cry, and Hyun did her best to comfort them. This scene made Choi emotional. He couldn't take his eyes off of them as this could be his last time seeing them. He was almost brought to tears, however he bit his bottom lip and held it in. This emotional scene was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Horrified, Choi quickly grabbed a golf club and he signaled for everyone to be quiet. Everything went silent, however the knocking continued. From the other side of the door, a person spoke saying he knew that they were inside, and he asked them kindly to open the door. Choi grasped the golf club tightly as he stood in front of his family, acting as the first line of defense. As he stood there with sweaty palms, he started to wonder if that was really a person behind the door. Ever since the apocalypse started, he has seen things he didn't think was possible, so he questioned if that was a person or a monster mimicking a person. Either way, it was dangerous because if it is a person, he doesn't know their intentions. He wanted to open the door, however he couldn't just open the door and potentially put his family at risk. This person continued to ask them to open the door, and a short while later the knocking stopped. Choi lowered his guard a little and he approached the door anxiously. He fixed his gaze on the door, questioning if the person was gone. Then the door suddenly opened with a blinding light. Choi instantly jumped towards his family and he covered them with his body. He started pleading, begging whomever this person is not to hurt his wife and children. This person, Lee, asked Choi to calm down. Confused, Choi opened his eyes and he turned around. He met the gaze of this shabby-looking person who was dressed in a stained white t-shirt and some shorts. Confused by this person's attire, he asked who he was. Lee introduced himself and explained that he lives next door. He showed them the bags he had with him and explained that he brought some water and tangerines. He asked them to spare some time to talk after they get a chance to eat. Choi was puzzled, and before accepting Lee's handout, he looked at his family. They were in dire need of water and food, and although Lee looks suspicious, he has no reason to reject the free food. He narrates that if Lee was going around dressed like that during the apocalypse, then he might be able to help them further. Choi stood up, and he invited Lee to come in. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then watch another one. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.